Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got a crazy story out of Colorado from Denver, CBS Local 4. Wes sent it, thanks a lot. Marshall fire victims trying to live out of RVs on burned property, but Superior Town Code doesn't allow it. So a fire swept through the area and destroyed a bunch of homes. Some of the homeowners have decided that the easiest thing for them to do and the best thing for them to do is to simply get an RV, park it on their property, and live there until their home gets rebuilt. And the local ordinances don't allow people to live on RVs long-term like that on their property, and so they're being told they can't do this, despite the fact that there was an emergency that caused this. So Rick Kuffner and his wife are at home with piles of burned and rusting junk just outside their RV because they're among the victims of the Marshall fire. Alan Jeanette wrote the story for Denver CBS Local 4. We have no choice in the matter. We've never lived in an RV in my life. I've never been homeless in my life, and you don't know what it feels like, said Rick Kuffner. There are two RVs with his daughter in another about 20 feet away. We're just asking for a little bit of a reprieve for us to get on our feet, get cleaned up, and start the rebuild, says the daughter. At age 70, Rick Kuffner has seen the town change. Over 100 years ago, his ancestors came to the area and settled. Since then, the family acquired about 10 pieces of property in original town Superior. Some had houses on them, some did not. They were landlords who never raised the rent. It was, he believes, some of the last affordable rental property in town. He said, you start out at $300 a month, you pay $300, and that's it. We've had renters that lasted 30 years with us. So he sounds like a good guy. But all the homes burned down. He said, I've never been homeless in my life. I am now basically, if they make me move out of here, I'm homeless, and that's not right. I own this property, and I pay taxes on it. The family recently got letters from the town telling them that they had placed RVs on the property improperly. And since they'd been there for 30 days, they'd have to be removed within 7 days. Temporary housing such as RVs are prohibited by local ordinance. Many people would say, well, gee, I don't know. Can't you suspend the ordinance due to an emergency? Isn't this an unusual circumstance? Well, tough situation that people are facing that need a place to live, said Mayor Clint Folsom. And if they've got pets and things like that, it definitely aggravates the situation. We get it. But we also had a town code in place prior to the fire and said that living in RVs and temporary structures is not permitted. Yes, everyone admits there is a town ordinance on it. We all know that. We know what it says. We're simply asking for a variance or some kind of leeway due to an emergency. The mayor said there are also people on the other side who would oppose allowing RVs. I understand why there's rules for your neighborhood. The daughter says we're not in a normal situation. Where the Kuffners park the RVs, they own 5 lots. They've got 5 lots on which they park 2 RVs. The units sit on a broad stone driveway, but the rubble of their burned properties is right nearby. They've applied for permits to clear the land. They've hired a contractor, and they believe the RVs are not likely in the way of the clearing. So they just need a place to stay till they can rebuild. Kuffners took their concerns to the Board of Trustees meeting Monday night. It was the same meeting in which the board decided to give a break to fire victims by discounting and rebating building permits, as well as voting in a new, more stringent building code for homes in terms of green building, but telling homeowners who are fire victims they can opt out and meet only the standards passed in 2018. So they're cutting slack to some victims of this, just not the people in the RVs and their property. The Kuffners said there were likely some others who would like to do what they've done as well. Rick's wife, Sue, told the board, we lived in a hotel with our dogs. That was a nightmare. But you guys need to have some compassion and make exceptions for people like us that have nowhere to go. Put yourself in our position. We're not bad people. We just need to live until we can build our home. The board said it would set a discussion about the issue at its next work session, but there was no action taken on the issue at the most recent meeting. And this is a great example of one where there's people who are going to say, well, rules are rules. We got to follow the rules, blindly follow the rules. Like a robot, we follow the rules. And there are often unusual circumstances. So, for instance, there's speed limits out there, right? But ambulances speed because they have an emergency. Everyone understands that. So if your house burns down and you got no place to live, you park an RV and you're living in the RV while you rebuild. I can't imagine there's that many people who think that's wrong. I can't. And now I understand that simply allowing it without ever addressing it, that might be a problem. But what the town should do is have a little meeting of its board or council or whatever they call themselves and say, we've got a bunch of people in town who are in need right now. Their home is burned down. We all know about it. It was on the news. While their homes are burned down, they want to stay on their property and stay there in an RV. Does anybody have a problem with allowing that so long as it's reasonable? And by reasonable, I mean that a person has an RV on their own property, right? In other words, we don't have my RV over there and somebody else's RV. No, you put an RV on your own property and your RV will stay there until such time as you have a home to move into and as long as you're making progress towards building your home. That's perfectly reasonable, perfectly reasonable. So here's the thing. The town council has said they'll bring this up at its next meeting. And if they do the right thing, they'll allow that. But I just think it's strange that this has come to a head like this. But that's part of the problem. And I understand that the people like the mayor and the town council do have to follow the rules in that they've got to do things the right way. And they can't just say, we are going to ignore the law. But they should bring it up as quickly as possible and address it as quickly as possible because there are people right now who don't have homes. And if they can't stay in their RVs, they're either homeless or they have to break the law. And I sympathize with somebody saying that they have pets and they don't want to stay in a hotel. Number one, it's hard to find a hotel that will let you stay with your pets for any length of time. Number two, they charge you extra for it. Number three, it's not good for the pets, and it's also not good for the other people in the hotel. I've been in a hotel before where somebody next door to me had a barking dog. I also stayed in hotels on extremely rare occasions with Milo and Wolfie. At the end of my videos, it says, remember Milo and Wolfie. Milo and Wolfie are gone now. But when I had them, I traveled with them a couple times, and we had some adventures. I remember staying at a hotel in Tennessee, and Milo and Wolfie had never been on an elevator before. And they were wondering why we were going into this little room with the doors closing behind us. And how when we got off and got out of that room, we were someplace else. How did that happen? And I remember then having to take them out and walk them and putting their leashes on and going out in the hallway, making sure it's no one out there. And then going over to the elevator, same thing. Doors open, go in, doors closed. What's this all about? This magical room we go into. But it's an amazing inconvenience. I mean, I have fond memories of that day, but I wouldn't want to live that way for weeks or months or however long it takes to rebuild my house. So I'm hoping that the people in that town can all come together and say, this is an extraordinary circumstance. It's unusual. We hope it never happens again. But for the time being, we're going to make an exception to the rule. Yes, rules are rules, but rules can have exceptions. And we're going to make an exception to let people live in some kind of temporary structure or an RV or whatever you want to call it in the code, but you're going to live there in something else while you clean the lot and put up another house. Once the other house is up, you move into the house and you park the RV. Makes complete sense what they had to do, so we'll see what happens. But Wes sent it to me, thanks a lot, from Denver, CBS Local 4. Marshall fire victims trying to live out of RVs on burned property, but the Superior Town Code doesn't allow it yet. Hopefully it will. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind.